Hello and welcome to an episode of Casual Friday. I'm here with the Duck. As always, the show is brought to you by Woo. Links available in the description below. This is our first spot Bitcoin ETF episode. It's nice to actually have the damn thing instead of speculating about it. But more worryingly than that, just before we started recording, the last thing that Don said before I cut him off was, "Ooh, Litecoin looks good." So if you were looking for bearish signals or even more reasons to be worried about his mental health, I think that's a pretty good one. How are you, Don? Happy ETF Friday.
Happy ETF Friday to you too. I mean,
I was going to discuss BTC and ETF and like 45k, but I guess you're not even mentioning ETH. Litecoin is on your radar. I didn't even have it on my watch list, mate. Like,
dude, Litecoin BTC is up 7% today.
Okay, let's Litecoin pill us. Let's start this episode with as bad as it's going to get, and then hopefully we can recover it as we go along.
I mean, it was more of a joke comment, but it actually doesn't look that bad, which is worrisome on many levels.
Are you looking at the daily? Is it that?
I mean, yeah, look at the daily. This is basically reclaiming for the first time in a long time.
Bro, that daily downtrend is actually hideous.
yeah, it's quite wild.
That is like, oh. Did they not know that there was a halving in this thing? I don't understand.
I think they forgot. I think, I legit though, like Litecoin also has a little bit of a narrative now, I think, because the least complicated altcoin ETF that you could get would be Litecoin when you think about it. So now that we have the Bitcoin ETF, we're all gonna speculate on what could be the next ETF. And I think the boomers, they like garbage like Litecoin and Bitcoin Cash and all that kind of stuff. I actually saw it on the news. They were talking about the Bitcoin ETF, and they had Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Litecoin on their slideshow.
Did they spell Ethereum with an F as well?
I mean, they might as well have.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I guess that's where the bounce is coming from. I actually don't hate it on an altcoin trading front. But this is obviously, like, if Litecoin rallies, we're all fucked.
Hey, I mean, if it gets you back and active in the markets, then maybe it's a necessary sacrifice. Just one last Litecoin punt, darling. I'll be back home soon.
Dude, it actually tickles me, but I'll refrain.
Oh dear. Okay. I mean, this is if it does something, I guess that would be interesting. There's an insightful statement for you. But I don't know. I feel like you're right in terms of complexity as far as Litecoin ETF stuff, but I think demand-wise, just does anyone give a shit like at all? I guess if you're going down the route of we're going to get an ETF for as many crypto products as possible and just take over the market to some extent, then it's one of the safer bets. But Bitcoin demand, like I kind of get, and narratively I kind of get it. Ethereum with its whole like world supercomputer, native yield, ESG, please make it not a security. I also kind of get as the premier crypto assets, if you will. I feel like as you go further out on the market cap curve, it gets a bit harder to justify.
Yeah, but I mean, like the one thing, and I mean, I'm very much in on your side of that argument. Like, I think ETH makes a million times more sense. That said, ETH's market cap is like a million times higher than Litecoin's now, because Litecoin dumped so much. So, I mean, it doesn't need many. Like, Litecoin is top 20 now. Do you remember when it was like top 3, top 5, top 10?
Oh my god, I didn't realize it fallen that far.
Time? Yeah, it's
all your fault.
Bleeding out.
You sold the halving and you did this.
Dude, I think the only people that made money on Litecoin in the last 3, 4, 5 years might be me and a handful of my followers, because everyone else doesn't even look at it anymore, which I think is better for everyone involved, like not looking at it. But yeah, I mean, Litecoin has, oh Jesus Christ, it's an eighth of the market cap of ETH.
You're doing some like bull market maths now, where you take an asset that you own and just take like a much bigger and better one and be like, hey, if it catches up, I'll get $10 million.
Dude, I don't even own it. But look at the Litecoin USD weekly chart.
God. How do we start the show with this? Do we want to restart this shit? Like, this is so depressing. We've had a historic week with the Bitcoin ETF. We're talking about fucking Litecoin.
Oh no, I mean,
this is so you. This is like you in a nutshell. Like,
oh yeah, it is. But I mean, look at that chart. Anyway,
you'd be the kind of guy where we'd go to a strip club. You'd be like, "Oh my god, these peanuts are amazing! I mean, look at the pistachios and the distribution of fucking macadamia to Brazil. Like, oh my god."
I mean, if they're good, they're good, no?
If they're good, they're good. Yes, the USD pair is sending as we speak. Literally, the 1 minute chart turbo mooning as you've been fucking shilling. Is this a stream or a recording?
I don't know what the fuck this is. Anyway, we'll ignore it, because if we don't ignore it, I mean, this says a lot of shit about the market, right?
Go on. Like, what's the argument then?
I mean, people are going down the risk curve quite substantially. Like they're going up the risk curve, whatever you want to call that. They're taking the shitty ones, like the shitty trades. Litecoin's always the last trade that people take before everything goes to shit. I don't want to shill anyone who's Litecoin trade, like real talk, because I think in general, like Litecoin's just a shitty asset to trade. And in general, every time it goes up for some reason, it spells the end of everything. I'm not saying that is the case right now. Like a 5 or 6 or 7% move isn't really significant too much. But yeah, I was just looking at it, and then you caught me pants
I don't know. The best trader I know said that it might get an ETF, so time to start fucking fishing.
I mean, to be like, I honestly, and this is just this is something that we can actually seriously talk about. Okay. That isn't a waste of everyone's time.
Hey, fuck you.
No, I'm like, I think the hunt for what is going to be in the next ETFs is basically on. And I mean, people, you saw this today with ETH BTC. It's the first time it's gone up in a while. The higher time frames actually don't look as shitty anymore. Like the moment we got the Bitcoin ETF, and this is something that we kept talking about on the show, right? Like, wait to buy ETH until you get the Bitcoin ETF, because then the narrative is not like, hey, we're getting a Bitcoin ETF. It's we got a Bitcoin ETF. If are we gonna get an ETH ETF? And I think that's gonna be something that is gonna basically, that's gonna be all that we're gonna talk about in the next couple of months. Like, is this gonna get an ETF? Is this gonna get an ETF? What are the chances? And this is something that's the new meta, I think. Like, just picking things that could get an ETF, which I find quite sad. But well, I mean, you gotta do what you gotta do, right? And if that's what's moving, that's what's moving. I think that's literally why Litecoin is moving. It's literally why ETH is moving. People are just speculating on the whole. Okay, the money ball is gonna roll down, and the narrative ball is gonna roll down and go to the shitters. Which, fair enough.
It does sound like an apt description of a circle of hell, where we're just stuck in ETF speculation in perpetuity, you know? It's like, what's next? And then this is going to be in the basket. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like I've literally overdosed on reading about ETFs. Like, I do not care at all. I love them, but we've turned Eric and James, the Bloomberg guys, into fucking household names. You know, it's like DiCaprio, fucking Oprah, your favorite football player, and then it's the Bloomberg ETF guys. They're like on the same level now. I'm expecting to see them on like fucking front row of sporting events at this stage. But they have been good. But you know what I mean? Like, in terms of narrative saturation, God, I'm so fucking tired of ETF stuff. I had some funny comments in my Monday Markets video because I sounded like shit, like my voice. And people were saying Cred is so sick of the ETF narrative. He literally got sick, which I found quite funny. Don, we haven't talked about BTC.
Yes.
Which is disturbing because we spent more time talking about Litecoin and whatever else. Let's talk about BTC. So, we got the ETF and the market's like pretty much in the same place for the time being, right?
Yeah. So I think that's good.
Go on.
Like, I think that's because I am and was in team sell the news, right? Like, people kind of see, like, in general, like, look at that wrong. They're like, okay, this guy said sell the news, and then the price isn't down the next day, so like he was just wrong. This obviously is going to take a while, right? Like, if I'm right, if I'm wrong, it probably won't take a while, because then you're just going to get like flows that are good. But if I'm right, this is going to take a while. Like, you're going to see consolidation around, like, I don't know, like 44 and 48, somewhere in that area, and basically distribute. And because the hype right now is basically that you're gonna see a bunch of new buyers come in on the ETF. That's why like you see like people are just very happy to hold, and I think that's reasonable. But if that buying doesn't come in, then people are gonna have to sell off, right? The fact that we're not really moving, I think that's as good as you can hope for on the bullish side of things, just based on the fact that we could have also just gotten like literally just sell the news type of like, okay, you just get a down candle, then you just keep going down. We've had that before on other product launches. So like I think that's quite good, but I still think like to me it's still kind of like it feels like a sell the news event more so than not. But we'll have to wait and see. Right now basically you have tiny daily candles. Yesterday ETF went live. That was a red candle but tiny. Today we've had a little bit of follow through but also not really anything. So yeah, we'll see. If it starts like if it keeps trickling down, that's obviously bad for bulls. If it kind of like stabilizes, the more it stabilizes, the more it kind of stays above 46k, I think the better for bulls. That's kind of how I look at it anyway, short term.
Yeah, I think that although there's a reasonable points, I think there were some skewed expectations for essentially if sell the news works as a trade, what it would look like. I think people borrowed too heavily from the altcoin playbook, where you have just like a generally short-term, very telegraphed event, and by definition there's sort of lower volume, smaller players, smaller market caps at hand, and it's just like a lot more mercenary, just fucking hit every bid you see into the news and that's it, you're done, right? Whereas if it is going to play out where they sort of higher market cap asset and just with this much attention and different flows entirely, it takes a while. Basically it's less of a okay, we'll just nuke everything now that the event is out of the way, and more of a okay, well, if we're not going to find marginal buyers up here, let's just slowly fucking get rid of it, because can't really get rid of it quickly in these conditions anyway. So that's what that feels like. I would note that it didn't close on a higher high after the first day of the ETF. So if you're in camp sell the news and you want like a minor vindicated victory, you can always say that, right? Look, I was at least partially right because it didn't make a new high on the day of the ETF. And if your argument was that this is going to be 10 billion whatever new inflows, then you'd expect that not to be priced in to some extent, right? And have like that visible market impact. I know there's like all sorts of settlement mechanics with this that mean that, you know, the flows don't just come up on the chart as you'd expect them to. We've seen like OTC get a bit busier and there's this whole delay process. So, you know, you'll have to kind of give it some time, essentially, either way. Like if you're on team sell the news, you need to give it some time because it won't be instant. If you're on team, well, this is really bullish and you're going to see new inflows, probably on a shorter term, but you still have to basically let it breathe a little bit. It's not totally surprising to see vols come down a little bit. On the technical front, one thing that I was speaking about or thinking about earlier is that I go through periods where I really wish that I only had the monthly time frame. So if you'll recall, the monthly close above 35k, right? Mm-hmm. The mid-range that I had for like the entire range was 47k. And I sort of went back and forth on that because I'm like, it's a very clean mid-range. It lines up with the cluster. But then I just kept fucking looking at the weekly chart, being like, oh, but you know, there's a level here, and then it's getting frothy at this point or whatever else. Whereas realistically, right, and I know there's some drawdown in between, if you just longed the monthly close above 35k and your rough invalidation was on the low of the month and you're targeting the mid-range, that's like a zero fucking drawdown trade essentially, from mid-30s into mid-40s. And it was on my radar, and I caught like a small portion of it, but again, over-managed, over-fucking babysat on the weekly and daily timeframes. I just really think, you know, this is all to circle back to the point is that there were some comments a couple of weeks ago, like, why do you guys like the monthly timeframe so much? I think because it fucking works, and it sort of drives your attention to what matters, and really takes you out of the minutiae of trade management. And then the obvious counter argument is, well, you know, if the monthly trade frequency is so low, how do you adjust for that? Well, the answer is, well, you don't really have to if you don't have like trading minimums. But realistically, the more sort of cavalier answer is you size the fuck up, right? Because like if you're getting fewer setups, but they have a higher expected value, or the edge is greater, or they have more alpha, or whatever terminology you want to use, the odds are in your favor, so to speak. Broadly speaking, you just size the fuck up. That's the cure to getting lower frequency, higher win rate setups. So that is a bit annoying for me. It feels like the monthly time frame I have not served the monthly time frame well. It's a skill issue on my behalf, Don. Like I was getting good signals at monthly sport at 20k. I traded that, but not the full monthly rotation. So that was like, okay, got a good monthly signal, didn't make the most of it because I looked at the weekly and the daily. And then pretty much the same at 35k plus. Got a good monthly and weekly signal at that point. Did okay, but didn't hold it anywhere near to where I should have because, again, of weekly and daily time frame management. Maybe that is making me currently biased. But because we are now in an area of monthly resistance, I'm like itching a little bit. I'm like, I want to fucking trade this. I want to trade it the whole way because the last couple of monthly setups didn't really make the most of them, if that makes sense. I will sort of par this over to you in a funny way. I saw someone leave a comment on on one of your tweets being like, you made us sell 37.5k or whatever. So my question to you is, since when have you been going to people's houses at gunpoint telling them how to manage their cryptocurrency exposure? Because that sounds a bit unlike you.
I mean, it's been like 2 months of working like that, where I just walk around.
Just show up.
Oi, now you fucking sell now. Nah, I mean, like people have been kind of like a little bit wilding out in my comments, and I mean, I kind of get it. I kind of don't like most. I like it doesn't make sense, but I kind of get where they're coming from. Like a bunch of people have been like, hey, you sold 37k, so I sold 37k, now fuck you. And I'm kind of like, there's a little bit of an odd kind of way to look at markets and trading and life in general, but fair enough. But yeah, I mean, I don't know, like people just like to copy trade, no matter how much I tell them that my circumstances are different than theirs. So
is that a polite way of saying I'm rich? Fuck you. Just wondering.
No, I wasn't actually meant that way.
My
but
circumstances are different. Brokey.
we can also take it that way.
Right.
No, but I just generally like I'm always kind of like surprised by that, given like technically I should have like gift basket in my on my front door all day then, because I mean I shield people into buying Bitcoin at 16k and then got them another buy at 20 and then got them another buy at 25. So it's kind of like this is how social media works nowadays.
But you didn't give them the Pico top, you fucking scamming rat. How dare you? If you're going to shield the bottoms, the only permissible exit is at the tops.
Yes. And it's funny because like to me, I look at the chart and to me, like my exit isn't even far away, right? Like from my kind of perspective. And I mean, I know that's a little bit of a more high time frame perspective.
Bro, your exit is like one candle away. Like realistically, it's like one rotation to the downside away.
Yeah,
it's not a big deal.
I look at this thing, right? And even ignoring, because I had good trades from the bottom to like 37.5, right? There's a few trades in there that I made even more of. But if you look at like my entry, which was below 16k, all the way to 37.5, which was my exit, right? Even if you ignore all the trading, that's 135% on Bitcoin, right? And now, like when you go from my exit to where we are right now, we're up from my exit 20%, right? So I'm just kind of like, how is this like even proportional in any kind of way? Like I'm kind of,
I mean, you know the answer to that, right? It's because people fucking ignore you at 16 and at 20 and then only start paying attention to like crypto and trading stuff in general once it's already up mega from the bottom. So there's a sort of non-linear distribution in conviction in people's trade ideas based on the price. It's probably the best way I can try to explain it.
Yeah.
Where if you're bullish at low/shitty/low volatility/low momentum prices, like no one really gives a shit. And then as you become more cautious, as the price goes up, because price has gone up, and that's like a attention plus marketing tool, people pay attention more. That's probably my best guess as to why and how that operates. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it does. It's just
unfortunately
it's so ill-guided. Like how does that make any sense? It's the same with trading. Like people get more and more bullish the higher prices go, and more bearish the lower prices go. I'm always kind of confused when I when I see that, because at the end of the day, right, like ignoring all the dumb fucking TA and everything that makes barely any sense when you actually think about it logically. I mean, if price goes low, you get to buy something cheap, and if price goes high, you get to you get to sell it more expensive. So it's kind of like, or like you get to buy it more expensive, right? So depending on how you look at it, like you should be getting more and more bullish the lower prices go, as long as you actually like what you're trading, and you should be getting less and less bullish the higher prices go, because I mean, I don't know. Like, I just look at it. Like,
should be less bullish now because I don't know.
not because
it makes sense.
I mean, because the shit is more expensive now, right? Like, but for some reason, that's not how people think. I don't know why that is.
Well, I think like it's to do with fair value, right? So most people essentially in their mind end up becoming momentum traders, and their understanding of the fair value of an asset, subconsciously or not, just basically follows the price or follows momentum. So the lower prices go, in their mind, they're like, this is bearish as fuck, and they move their targets down, and implicitly, the fair value of the thing is moving down as well. That's also why they sell early. And then as prices go up, their understanding of fair value in their head also moves up, and moves up quickly, sort of in tandem with the momentum, which is why there's less reluctance to buy high, and also an increased reluctance to buy shallower dips. I'm just speculating and theorizing here, but that's just from observation how most people end up pricing these things in their head. Like if you have like a somewhat stable or less reactive model for the fair value of any given asset, then you will be getting bullish as price goes lower, because of just from like a mean reversion point of view, and then be getting bearish as price goes higher, because again, it's just shooting way past fair value, and there's like a mean reversion trade to be done, or it's like a greater standard deviation away from your understanding of the median or fair value or whatever else. Whereas if you're someone who's like super reactive and almost super emotional about this stuff, then if the price is going down, that means the fair value is like way lower as well, and it goes up, it's way higher as well, and then you can justify your decision making of sort of trading close to the market if that's what your mental model is like. That's probably the best way I can make sense of it. But that could have just been complete fucking nonsense jargon. I don't know what you think of that, but it just feels like both on Twitter, on social media, if you speak to people, most of it is just like momentum monkeys, right? Like price goes down, that means it's bad, it's going to go lower. Price goes up, that means it's good, it's going to go higher. And the corresponding beliefs with that is like, if prices goes lower and it bounces, it's going to be a shallower bounce. And if price has been going high and it dips, it's going to be a shallower dip. It's just basically the fair value of a thing is just almost one-to-one tied with its price. And if you don't have sort of a separation between the two, or if your model for fair value kind of overshoots depending on short-term momentum, you're just going to be a slave to volatility in either way. And the idea of like selling at a premium or buying at a discount is just very hard to fucking incorporate if whatever the price is equals the more or less the fair value of that asset, right?
Yeah. It's quite wild, because I mean, I get it somehow, because how the fuck do you actually determine fair value for something as fraudulent as crypto?
Fucking Jamie Dimon on the podcast.
No, but like legit, like how do you do it, right? Like it's very, very hard. So I get where the like you kind of just, you're like, price goes up, everyone thinks it's good, so it has to be good, and then the opposite. For me, it's actually quite exciting. Like this whole like, and we didn't really talk about it. We actually got a Bitcoin ETF, right? That's so fucking wild.
I've got like fucking 12 of them, mate.
Yeah,
it's 12 times as bullish.
I mean, just ignoring that, like Elizabeth Warren, I don't know if you saw that tweet. She tweeted that it was basically a mistake.
Yes, of course.
Absolutely ludicrous, right? Like it's absolutely hilarious, because like when you think about it, and I'm very much, I don't want to go into politics, right? But and this is how everything that is bad starts. Like I don't want to go into politics, but but like the Democrats, right, complain about Trump like kind of not giving a shit about like laws, regulations, whatever, and just doing whatever he wants to do, and just kind of like spitting on the courts. But then you have like the Democrats, right, that kind of do the same thing, right? She's openly just like, this is just kind of like, this is a mistake, shouldn't have been made, like we should be doing something else, blah blah blah. I don't know, it just kind of feels somewhat similar, right? She has an opinion that she thinks is like, this has to be this and that way, and then if the law and everything else disagrees, then the law is wrong, right? It seems to me like that's pretty similar to whatever the fuck the other side is doing. So kind of like, it's very hard to commentate on a high horse if you do this kind of shit. But anyway,
the radical centrist is back, ladies and gentlemen.
I mean, it's just how it is. I think like it's just dumb. Like, it's just dumb shit.
I mean, you're procedurally correct, right? Like, even in the SEC press release around the approval, they said that a large part of it was because of the Grayscale case, where as a matter of administrative law, the court found that they were sort of capricious and arbitrary in denying the Grayscale conversion to a spot Bitcoin ETF. That's a pretty, ironclad legal decision from, I think it was the Court of Appeal equivalent, definitely a higher court. And so if you're going to argue against that based on your own personal preferences, there are uncomfortable rule of law implications for that, right?
Yeah.
So I guess Grayscale, I mean, it's very hard. I have mixed feelings about Grayscale, because on the one hand, if it were not for their court battle and the legal battle, which seemed futile at times, there's a non-trivial chance that this wouldn't have been approved. But at the same time, like, Grayscale via GBTC ended up just like killing our industry to a very non-trivial extent and contributing to the collapse. So it's a bit of a mixed bag there, at the very least. It was like the Kingmaker trade, Widowmaker trade. So like everyone gets rich because of GBTC. Everyone goes broke and liquidated because of GBTC. And then we kind of get a spot Bitcoin ETF, at least in part because of Grayscale. It's like, I don't know, guys. Stop being so chaotic. Fuck.
Yeah, and then they have the highest fees to kind of beat out the customers. I mean, I don't know. I'm not a big fan. Just straight up not a big fan. But yeah. It's interesting.
At least Barry's gone. Big week.
Yeah. Big week.
Big week. I'm going to open up a chart, by the way, Don. You can
please
start your thought if you'd like. It's your chart, actually.
Oh no.
At least I hope so, if I've saved it correctly. Yes. This is your BTC chart, saying now that the ETF is through, we can finally start considering levels on the chart again. I'm still on break, but if we either retest 35 or 45 after a move up in the next 3 months, I could be convinced to get active again, straight up, and I'd have to wait for a bit longer. I thought straight up was just like you going all gangster on me, like straight up. This makes sense. Do you want to talk through the logic? Because it seems like in either case, it's a pullback type of entry, right? And the question is just, where is it a pullback from? And as a result, where is it a pullback to? So I'm guessing you're not interested in momentum entries, and also sort of why these levels, where do they come from? How do you see this playing out?
I mean, like let's start with the pessimistic. Wow. with the positive interpretation, right? Like, we go to 60K. I think in general that would get a bunch of people very hyped up. It's an old resistance level that's been tested twice before. So I could see a lot of people be in the camp that, hey, we've tested this a bunch of times before. We're going to break out and kind of disrespect it, go into it with leverage. On top of that, just having a bunch of monkeys, basically momentum monkeys on that trade, just because Bitcoin would be at that point quite far extended. So I could see that be a nice pullback area, right? Like, if you go straight up, I think 60K would be really good resistance, and I could see us pull back. I think that pullback would be quite aggressive, quite quick, and one that you absolutely should be buying, right? Like, if we hit 60K, any pullback that you get should be a buy, because at that point we have tested 60K 3 times. I think then on the next test it wouldn't hold, and then you would go to 70, 80, 90, 100, whatever. Don't think it goes to 100, but like, that's kind of where I would look at that, or how I would kind of interpret that price action. If we went like up from here, basically, if the people that are saying the ETF is going to be a buy the news event are right, that is kind of the path to take, I think. Obviously, the even more bullish path would be just going to 60K straight up, blasting through it, going to 100. I just like I'm not even entertaining that one just because I don't think it's very realistic, but I could be just wrong there. But for me in general, I couldn't be buying that anyway. Like if there was just like 10, 15, 20 monthly candles in a row that are green, like this is just a lockout trend, and I literally, like, I don't trade those. Like I just wait till it stops locking people out, and then I kind of see, including me obviously, and then I wait and see how it goes afterwards. Anyway, that's kind of like the bullish side of things. The bearish side of things, which isn't actually that bearish in my opinion, and people got very upset that I kind of even mentioned this, is that the sell the news thing is, or would be, coming to pass. That would mean that we're getting rejected at this monthly resistance that we're trading at right now. Whether you want to have it at 45 or 47, I think that's generally like the area. I think it's not the strongest monthly resistance, but it's resistance, midpoint, whatever you want to call it.
Oh, he's back to respecting the mid-range. Here we are.
Yeah. I mean, if that plays out, right? Like if we get the sell in, and I think this is more important than resistance
Agreed.
itself, but if we get the sell the news event, right, which is possible, you have a bunch of people that speculated on the ETF getting a shitload of volume, getting a shitload of new flows, bullish flows. I don't think a lot of people bet on the ETF bringing bearish flows. It makes no sense. And if they're disappointed, right, you could make an argument for that they're just going to sell the news. And that, I think, would just lead us to the next monthly support, the monthly just being the gold time frame as usual. And the next monthly support is 35 to 37.
12K. Oh, sorry. Yeah, that one.
Yeah. And I think that is quite reasonable. I think both, like the 60K argument and going back to 45, and the getting rejected here and going to 35 arguments are quite valid. I'm in camp, okay, I think 35K makes more sense. I think it's more likely, but I mean, I don't think both of those are unrealistic. I think if you go too far from these, then it becomes a little bit unrealistic, as in, like, if you think it's just gonna go and break 60K straight up and go up, or because just looking at the price action that we've had, this has literally been a straight line up even on the monthly. It's rare that we get like just a full year of bullishness. Not impossible, but rare. And the same if you're like starting to, like, if you are, now that we have the ETF, and this, like, if the ETF would have been denied, I think you could have talked about, okay, we're gonna get like 20K prices again, because the entire rally was based on the ETF. Now that we have it approved, I don't think any of those targets make sense anymore. So like Carpo's 12K, completely dumb. 14K monthly support, I think very unrealistic. 20K, very unlikely. And then, like, if you want to make an argument anywhere that if I said like worst case scenario, I would say like I would be surprised by prices below 25. I think that's very unlikely, and even getting there is very unlikely to me. So I think like 35K, reasonable first area of support. If you want to be completely bear target, 30K. But that already seems like stretching it. But I mean, who knows? So those are the two on the downside. On the upside, I mean, I think 60K is just the most important one. And then I think, like I said, if you get a 10, 20, 30, 40% pullback from 60K, any of those, I think, is just a buy. And then you could just keep on adding and see if this can actually break new all-time highs and kind of go crazy.
It's nice that in both cases there's like a unified target, right? So like if it goes to 60 and pulls back from there, your target is like a triple top breakout. If it goes to mid 30s first, presumably you wouldn't be selling mid 40s again. Like second time mid range sell is a weird one, and you'd be looking for that to be a higher low to go up and test 60K presumably. Yes. So it's quite nice that at least there's that roadmap. It is very weird to live in a world where if you argue or even mention that 30K is support, as you did, that your mentions become toxic garbage. The same people weren't buying 16K, right? Yes. And most of the discourse was, and this is very recent, we were discussing whether there will be another cycle. I mean, we weren't, but there was discussion like on Twitter and stuff as to whether, we're done, essentially.
Yep.
So to go from that, as in no new cycle ever again, to no new dips ever again is, quite the transformation. One trend that I don't like is that I'm seeing a lot of recycled logic around why we won't dip or can't dip to the same magnitude ever again. And those arguments have just never worked. They've never been right. We've had it around the CME futures. We had it with coin IPO, for fuck's sake. We had it just during on-chain bull market and people talking about realized holders, this, that, value nonsense. We had it with DeFi, where the argument is, well, you never have to rotate. You can just go to stables and then quickly redeploy or sit in some yield farms. So you never have to sort of really sell to get out. We had it when the quarterly basis, the sort of futures arb was stuck at 20% permanently, if not higher. The argument was, oh, why would you exit? You could just like collect some yield and you're still in the ecosystem. We had on-chain adamantium support at 45K. Like, these arguments just fucking suck. And they don't stand the test of time. And so whenever you think the market has like fundamentally fully changed in such a way that downside volatility is gone, you're probably wrong, right? Like even with spot ETF, those aren't the types of flows that just make regular dips impossible. So I think that logic is really bad and isn't a particularly helpful guiding light. I do want to get your take on another sentiment thing, actually. Chris Benisk.
Oh, yeah.
He made
him. He's one of the rare good people on Twitter, I think.
It's true. And you were bull posting, circle jerking each other at 16K, if I recall correctly.
Yes.
You, Chris, Eric Wall, as if you needed more fucking signal. But he said, ready to be wrong here, but looking around at the froth, I can't help but wonder if this will be reminiscent of a Coinbase IPO, a momentous event that caused many to expect much higher afterwards, but instead that was the top for a couple of quarters for BTC. And notice how this isn't like some 12K is programmed type of tweet, right? It's just saying, hey, if the market gets over its skis on a news event, then it can top out for a while. And I think he still has like a 1 trillion market cap in general, bigger target. And he's just kind of looking at this shorter to medium term. And some of the comments are just pretty shocking if you go through them. And a lot of the comments are from people who sort of joined in, 2023, 2021 type of stuff, who arguably should know better. But sentiment-wise, it just feels like the market has understandably been conditioned to not expect high time frame pullbacks, right? And realistically, who can blame them? Like, if you look at the weekly chart, if the spot ETF came in, that news started percolating like in the mid-20s, right? And we had like a dip to 26 or thereabouts, which didn't break market structure, didn't do shit. But realistically, since then, we've had like one down week since that higher low, right? Maybe like 2 or 3 if you count the consolidation, which I don't really count. And even those 1 or 2 red weeks are like barely red. But pretty much since the ETF, there have been 0 high time frame pullbacks. And that's not normal. And that's not to imply that it's manipulated or whatever else, but it's just like this has been the case for a while, but I don't think it's a permanent state of affairs. And I think eventually, if you're patient enough, be it from 60 to mid 40s or from mid 40s to 30 or whatever else, you will get that type of pullback that is a reminder that sort of markets trade both ways. And that should probably be seen as an opportunity, if anything, with how market structure looks at the moment. I would quite like, just for narrative purposes, it'd be really nice if at any point the market, if it happens like soon, it'd be narratively very compelling. Like, we start to nuke and people are like, oh, well, the ETF was obviously sell the news. Look at the fucking shit inflows. It's a massive fraud. And then I'd love the TradFi guys and all the fucking politicians to start coming in and saying, oh, look at this mistake that we made, or the SEC made by approving the ETF. Now investors are hurting because it's been down only. Sentiment fucking flips. I think that'd be amazing setup wise to get at a high time frame support, but that's just sort of narrative masturbation, really. I just wanted to, what do you think of sentiment? Actually, before we get that take, he mentions froth in the tweet, right? Specifically the word froth. What's your take on whether or how much froth there is. I think it depends where you look, right? So if you look at, for example, ETH and some of the beta people have been punting and some altcoins, there are some signs of it. But in terms of Bitcoin specific leverage, I think it's actually like more reasonable than it has been after the flush. Like that got a lot of people out of the fucking market. You know, that nuke on the, what was it?
Quite healthy.
3rd of January? Yeah. That 3rd of January wipeout got a lot of fucking people out. So like the annualized basis for the quarterlies has been down only since then. At its peak, when I did that Monday Markets episode, I was like, why did it just fucking double for no reason? It's kind of halved since then and didn't really ramp up with the breakout. So quarterlies are like reasonably in line. Funding is generally has been fine on the BTC front as well. Open interest has been, you know, nothing to write home about. Hasn't been like super scary. And even if it were, those aren't particularly expensive positions to hold at the moment in any case. And yeah, I mean, ever since the wipeout on the 3rd of January, we went from a high of, and this is on Binance Futures, but although this is aggregated via Velo, it was 8.2 billion at a high, down to a low of 6.5, and it's about 7.6 at the moment, with price trading more or less around the same area. And you can just see funding wise or whatever else compared to that move, premiums are pretty flat on the BTC front. So do you agree? So sorry for the long fucking intro as usual, but do you agree with the froth comment? And if so, where do you think is most evident, or where can that argument be made most strongly?
I mean, on CME, like if you look at that data, like that's quite extraordinary compared to how it used to be. I mean, at some point, I don't think it's the case anymore. I haven't checked. I've been disabled in the last few days, but they've been kind of like running circles around Binance even, right? Where you're like, what the fuck? Like, this is completely nuts. If any place there, but in general, I think it's, if you want to like comment on the froth side of things, I think it's mostly just in the attitude that people have. Like people are like the comments that you get are very, very frothy, whereas the market itself, like the fundings, like you said, I don't really see that much of it. So I don't know, like I wouldn't necessarily say like I agree with him. It feels very frothy right now, but I wouldn't necessarily say it's super frothy just because I look at like you said, at fundings, at like open interest, all of that kind of stuff, and I don't really see it either. So I mean, if anything, like you feel it, you don't see it. And that could just be cope, right? That could just be like people being like, I have a bias and I'm gonna say it's frothy because to me it is. And a market that goes up like this, right? Like when you have a market that doubles and triples in a very short amount of time, can feel frothy to like no matter how it's actually trading to almost anyone, depending on how you look at it. So it's quite difficult because you always have to be like, okay, like I've been trading for 10 years. My gut feeling is quite good. So, I mean, I will take notice. But you can also be like, hey, I'm looking at this evidence and there's nothing of the sort, or like not as much as you would like. So maybe it's just me using a bias or like having a bias. And it's very hard to figure out. So I feel the same way. It feels frothy. I look at the kind of the fundings, everything, and I don't see it as much. So I don't know. It's something that I thought like because of those reasons I just don't say right now because it feels frothy, but I cannot really say why.
Yeah, there's a divergence there, isn't there, in terms of how it feels in the data. Maybe it's sort of not froth per se, but a certain degree of entitlement and or complacency as far as attitudes go, which isn't as scary as because the market is just positions, right? Like the actual fucking empirical evidence is much more important than this type of stuff in general, or at least you want them to cohere. But I think both can be true, where from a premiums and everything point of view, there's nothing terribly scary going on. But from like an attitude of don't be retarded, we'll never dip, we can't dip, BlackRock, passive spot ETF inflow 10 billion. It's like, I don't like these people. Like these people generally don't stick around and don't make money. So I think you can have both. One thing that I'll also mention is that when it comes to premiums and shit, when you look at just like funding, open interest, quarterlies, and all that type of data, you're getting a snapshot of the market now. It's not necessarily indicative of what will happen if the market moves even a bit higher or a bit lower, right? So part of the reason why a lot of the open interest arguments and funding rate arguments are sort of limited in scope is because you quite often in crypto get situations where the market starts to dip and you look at it and think, well, like it's dipping, fine, but there isn't like a ton of leverage from now, so it shouldn't be that scary. There shouldn't be a cascade. And then you fucking blink and the entire market gets balls deep long levered to the tits as it starts dipping. And then you're like, oh shit, this this is actually quite bad. So that data can change quite quickly and can create sort of vulnerable open interest or liquidation cascades, even if it doesn't look vulnerable from a snapshot before the market starts to move. That's probably the best way I can explain it. It's like, even if it looks completely fine and reasonable, that should be your baseline, but it can change very quickly. Like if the market breaks out and again, fucking basis doubles or some shit, you might be like, okay, well, that's clearly different from what it was before. Or even if it starts dipping and funding gets fucking roofed, in that case, then you might also infer that, okay, it looked healthy when volatility was low, but now vol's picked up and people are buying the dip with leverage, and I think this looks materially different than, 2, 3, 5% ago. So that's the same with looking at fucking spot order books, right? There's a lot of analysis, and I think it's that there is more merit than before in looking at sort of passive order flow and bids and asks on Coinbase, for example, and that type of shit. And there are moments in the market where it confers a lot of signal. Like you remember back in the day, fucking Bitfinex walls and shit used to be pretty useful before they started getting psyoped. But in general, the thing about passive order flow is it just gives you a snapshot of the market as it is now at these prices and with this volatility. When shit starts to move, you can see those orders getting pulled. You can see, the opposite, like they just get completely stacked up, and now they're not $2,000 away from price, but like $20 away from price. These aren't sort of, by definition, these aren't sort of active, dynamic views of the market or snapshots or people actually trading. Like all of this just really is subject to change once the market moves. So if you're getting your view of the market from okay, well, here's funding now, here's open interest now, here's the spot bids and offers now, and this is going to inform my outlook in the future, I think that is kind of erroneous inference.
Yeah, it's actually I mentioned the same on the Woo podcast, actually. Shout out to that, where it's basically the entire like funding and everything in that regard can change very quickly. So there's a difference, and I 100% agree with what you said. Like it's basically it's a day-to-day thing more so than just the sentiment thing, which is not necessarily a day-to-day thing, right? Like the market, by moving in a certain way, builds up sentiment in a way that will kind of make people position one way or the other, depending on how price goes, right? So you can, like you said, you can have nukes, or you can go, like Bitcoin could go and drop to like 40K and then bounce to 43, and you could have like 10 times the funding and 10 times the OI that you have right now, right? Just based on people being like, hey, holy shit, this is the dip to buy. And this is where I can reasonably size up and risk a lot. So 100% agree with you there. It changes a little bit, but then it's a little bit harder to kind of like, and this is something that I think every trader struggles with, kind of like deciding what is like actually just like quantifiable, like your edge, or like if it's just like your gut feeling, whatever, and like kind of deciding what it is actually really, really hard. So yeah, I don't know.
And when to
I don't know
use
if that makes any sense. Yeah, and to use it and how to use it and when and what, like all of that shit is the hard part in trading, right?
Yes. Also, this has probably been one of our fucking most rambling episodes so
terrible.
far.
Absolutely
so
terrible.
Either we're just fucking spilling alpha, dropping straight fire, or it's just meandering nonsensical pontification from two fucking washed up boomers. I'm really hoping at least some portion of it is the former, but let's be real, Don. It's like if you have to listen to me, a fucking guy who draws lines on charts, talk about like the psychology of market participants' understanding of fair value, you're fucked, right? Just leave a like on the video and leave before it gets worse.
We started off with talking about Litecoin.
Oh, so mate, this episode is terrible.
No, so that's why everyone was warned, basically. Like, you you kind
that's
of
true.
you get what you like. I mean,
Start
what
how
did
you
you
want to
expect?
finish.
Yes, what did you expect realistically?
Yeah,
So,
mental faculty is not present. Obviously,
nope,
your back is broken. I've been sick for a week. You know, give us a break.
exactly.
Any other BTC TA stuff? I think that's really straightforward. You know, mid 40s. If sell the news is right, it'll be resistance. If not, it won't be. Pullback wise, at this point, you might as well wait for a sizable one if you're going to get it. If that's from 60, great, still a good setup. You can size up and make a lot of money. Probably not financial advice, don't do that. If it's from 47 or whatever down to 30s, also a reasonable area to do business. And you know, the weekly chart basically shows the same thing, right? All those levels overlap. We could get into the discussion of if 35, 37 is monthly and then 32 is weekly. Maybe you wick to the weekly and close above the monthly if it gets ugly, but that's something we've covered before. I'm still keeping tabs on the daily time frame somewhat. I'm waiting to see if we can get a higher daily close from like in the post ETF period. I think that's like a decent sort of proxy for whether sell the news is going to win / work or not. And then I'm also looking at the sort of breakout level at 44k, because if we have a failed breakout post ETF having failed to make a higher high close, I think that's a bit of a sort of behavioral change, shifting character or whatever, that's probably notable. And it could be a sort of not cascade, but you know, the sort of time frame overlap that we've discussed before, where you're at monthly resistance, the weekly is whatever, and then the daily starts to look a bit shit, and it's sort of the early sign of a slightly bigger move. Just like the 16k one, there was like a 4-hour range there and a daily range, and it's the sort of setup snowballed into something bigger. I think there's at least some chance that if the daily ends up being a post-ETF failed breakout, you can apply the same framework or at least consider it. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
Anything else on the daily?
I mean, if you look at this thing, like the best case for me for the bulls, right, would just be if this thing didn't really move, it just went sideways for a while, kind of absorbed all of the, like, I mean, there is a lot of people that bought for this news and that are going to get rid of their positions now, right? So like, if the market can absorb all of that with just new inflows, I mean, that's great news, right? So if this goes sideways, I think it's the best case. I mean, best case just straight up, but I think, like I said, at that point you start getting into super frothy territory, so you don't necessarily want that. I think sideways would be best. If it starts bleeding or continues bleeding like it does right now, which is just like a slow trickle down, like even if you go to like the 4-hour or whatever, this kind of like slow move down, that's the worst case, right? So this needs to stop doing that, needs to go sideways, because if it keeps bleeding down, goes towards like 44, it starts getting dangerous real quick. Because I think like if you come back, and I mean, this is a short-term trading thing, but if you come back towards like 44 to 43, I think there's a good chance that it just completely goes below 40 pretty much instantly. So that's the risk on the downside. And then obviously on the upside, you could argue like, hey, we need to take out the ETF highs at 49k, also possible. But I think in general, like the more actionable kind of like, or the more like, okay, I'm in trouble thing that you can actually see on the chart would be like anything close to 44k. It starts getting really, really dangerous.
Really dangerous.
Yeah, dangerous in the sense that
It's just a fucking
like,
chart, bro. Relax.
yeah, dangerous in the sense that you could get like a wipe, like a leverage wipe. It could be trading immediately afterwards back at 44 and then go up to 50 again. But like these kind of like, there's a lot of people that are positioned in this, just generally, and even in spot, right, where like a lot of people are kind of thinking, is this a sell the news event or is it not? And you have a lot of people kind of like going back and forth based on price action. Like if the market goes up, they're like, it was not, obviously. And
We
if the
already had
market
that.
yeah, and if the market goes down, like it's the opposite. So like that is something that you have to keep in mind, right? And I think 44 to 43k, that's the area to look at, the most important area to kind of observe.
Nice.
So,
Yeah. Wow, we got to something actionable like an hour into the episode, Don. How's that?
you
If it helps, it's the exact thing I mentioned on Monday Markets. So
go. Well,
we've done fucking useless episode. No, I'm sure maybe there's at least one person for whom the meandering rambling is therapeutic. So thank you to that one listener. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense on the BTC front. Let's talk about your favorite crypto asset, which actually, fuck it, let's run it back one last time.
Okay.
I remembered you mentioned that it's kind of buy the news versus sell the news. Now, I also want to outline something that we brought up a few weeks ago on Casual Friday, which is that the sell the news types of traders, they aren't just fully news based. I think there's a non-trivial GBTC element to all this. I don't remember if we discussed this on the show or offline. Do you remember? I think it was on the show, right?
I think probably. We
Probably.
don't talk offline.
It's true. We don't, it's not in our contract to talk offline and be friends. So you're absolutely correct. My apologies. The argument there is basically you had a ton of fucking... I mean, GBTC had massive AUM, right?
Yeah.
And for a while, you were essentially trapped in that because there were no in-kind redemptions. So you either have to sell it like at sometimes 20 to up to, what was it, 40+% discount?
Almost 50%, I think.
Exactly, yeah. So it was a terrible... You were stuck, basically, in like an illiquid form of Bitcoin. And then with this conversion to an ETF and the discount basically fully closing or coming very close, certainly compared to when it was 40% and so on and so forth, that is a lot of sort of effective liquid Bitcoin supply being unlocked. So the bullish outcome there is obviously they're like, okay, well, thank God, let me just move out of GBTC and move into something cheap and like a real product without the 1.5% fee, like a BlackRock or a Fidelity or a VanEck or whatever else. The other side of that is if you were trapped for a while and now BTC is like at a higher price, and both the higher price plus discount close means that the way you're marking that BTC is like you're up mega, and you might just want to fucking take profit in that. Having been locked for a while, and taking profit in that case just means selling it instead of rolling it or rotating it into another ETF. So if there's any non-news trader sell pressure, I think GBTC is, as we've discussed before, a plausible culprit. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think in general, a lot of the people probably got rid of the GBTC, like the people that wanted to get rid of it, before, like when the discount closed significantly, like when it was like 5 or 10%, because you basically sat through hell if you were in that product, right, for the longest time. So I could see a lot of people having already sold that, but I think a lot of speculators basically bought that discount, right, and bought that discount speculating on the ETF. And now that we have the ETF, that whole trade is done. You obviously close it out. So I could see, just even if it's not people that were like originally like holding GBTC for the longest time, I could also see it just be like speculators basically taking the free 5 to 10% and now closing that out. So yeah, I agree. Like I think in general, like a lot of the volume, or like at least a significant amount, from like the ETFs is gonna be just people getting out of that shit product and getting into new ones. Like,
yeah, that's been the case already. I think Eric made a tweet, one of the Bloomberg guys, about the volume numbers, sort of inflows versus trading versus how much of it was GBTC. And I think GBTC was one of the larger contingents, just people trading around and mostly out of that, which doesn't come as a huge surprise. I mean, I'm happy for those people. Thank God, dude. Like, if you managed to sit through that 40% discount, especially at the lows, right? Because that's the issue as well, that this thing was just getting hammered as the price was getting hammered as well. You fucking deserve a break, I think.
You do, yeah. I mean, one thing that we haven't talked about is just MicroStrategy, right? It's down 30%.
Yes.
And I think that's pretty much for the same reasons. Like, why the fuck would you hold MicroStrategy now that you can buy like an actual ETF? Now, obviously, there's a lot of MicroStrategy kind of fanboys, whatever, that will say, no, it's an actual company and they're going to buy more Bitcoin, blah, blah, blah. But I think in general, like, the whole appeal for this thing got watered down significantly, right?
Yes, it's like a Bitcoin holding company that you don't need anymore. essentially.
Yes, exactly.
And yes, they have a lot of BTC, and maybe they could fucking start loaning it out or some shit and earning some yield. I think that's kind of scary in its own right. But yeah, I think the fact that we just massively reduced complexity and lowered the barrier to entry, if you want like a regulated way to bet on BTC. If you want the speculative stuff, there's still Coinbase, there are still miners and shit like that where you could gamble a little bit. But if you're like a neither here nor there sort of pseudo expensive kind of holding company, not really, you're stuck in this uncomfortable middle where I think, yeah, I don't know. But Chad Saylor did sell a bunch of his shares at the top to buy more BTC. So
as usual,
fucking legend, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's just like all of these, like Coinbase, like the miners, like everything has been a little bit of a sell the news event. It's just like Bitcoin's been holding up better than the rest. Like MicroStrategy is down 30%, Coinbase is down 30%. Like it already started dipping before.
Yeah.
And a lot, like a bunch of the miners that I've seen, I don't really follow that scene too much.
I don't follow the miners either, Don. That's illegal.
Jesus Christ. Anyway, that's all basically just levered Bitcoin anyway, so I don't really care about it too much. If I want to lever up on Bitcoin, I might as well just do it in the market, right, without having extra headaches. But yeah, all of that has been sell the news event. Like for all of those, it's been a sell the news event. Now it's gonna be the question: is Bitcoin gonna follow suit or not? For me, I think it will, but we'll see.
I think you've done a fantastic job of at least providing intellectual cover if sell the news doesn't work on BTC. Because if people are like, oh, you said sell the news, you fucking retard. It's like, no, I was talking about coin and MicroStrategy.
That's my way out. Yeah, I'm like, oh shit, yeah, it was all Sailor.
You know me,
Sailor.
the active MicroStrategy trader. Yeah,
yeah,
makes sense.
Oh no.
ETH, Don, ETH.
Yeah, the good old ETH. I mean, it's going up. It's still going up. Even like right now, where Bitcoin's going down, ETH's going up.
What does that mean?
I mean, it's unsurprising, really, right? It's something we kept talking about. People are speculating on the Bitcoin, like on the Bitcoin ETF profits rolling into ETH. Now, I think, and this is something that I kept on saying too, that if the Bitcoin ETF is a sell the news event, right? As in, if we get a dip now, ETH is actually not going to be performing as well as other people think, just based on the fact that that's the whole narrative, right? Like kind of getting ripped beneath the feet of the ETH people when you have like a sell the news event of the ETF. I think that at that point makes very little sense. So you kind of have to have Bitcoin go sideways or up from here for the ETH narrative to play out. But in general, right, like it's the first time in more than a year that it actually makes sense to hold ETH, in my opinion, just based on the fact that all of those news, like all of it, the entire narrative can be now shifted to ETH, and that's at least like something. And then the chart fixes itself soon enough, usually. So that's why I think like at least now you can just intellectually defend the ETH position, which is all people need to long ETH, I think.
Also, it's got nothing to do with narratives. It's because of your trend line. Let's be real. The news isn't real.
That's such a chat trend line.
TA predicts everything. So the trend line knew that this was going to happen. That's how markets work. I agree with your main assessment that it makes sense now, but I also think that you need BTC to stay afloat for this to work.
Yes.
Because
100%.
if the market just fucking piles it, like BTC is kind of soft sell the news, which is that it starts underperforming relative to ETH, and then the market piles into ETH leveraged. If BTC is a non-soft sell the news, like it starts to nuke, then you've just added leverage like further out on the risk curve, and it's just going to get fucking dragged down. You know, just like BTC was dragging ETH up for a lot of this, I think it's equally capable of dragging it down, which is why if you're rotating to ETH, I think at least implicitly you're still bullish BTC, or at least consolidation BTC, and you can't really be bearish BTC, because I think the probability that we have like a full fucking decoupling where BTC goes down like 5-10% or like puts in a big move and ETH goes up 10-20%, that's quite rare in my mind. If that happens, I think it's like a turbo blow off top froth thing. that would be fucking really not obvious, but I think that'd be like high signal if that were the case. But in general, I think rotating to ETH kind of assumes a moderate BTC and just kind of hot ball of money thesis, and not like, okay, BTC can sell the news, but look how strong ETH is, doesn't matter what BTC does. I disagree with that articulation of the rotation trade.
Yeah, I think this is a little bit why why I say like ETH's a little bit cursed right now, because it has this in this weird position where if you take Bitcoin bid away by rotating it into ETH, the entire market gets weak, and then you have this shitty situation where ETH might outperform Bitcoin, but then one, for how long, and two, are you actually going to gain anything in USD terms? And I don't know. But at least the ETH BTC ratio is going up, right? So
I mean, that's a good weekly candle.
Yeah, it is a really good weekly candle,
especially above 0.57 on a weekly engulfing. I think would be pretty good.
I like it. I like it as a chart. I like the narrative somewhat.
Yes.
So the thing is, like, I would definitely not long ETHUSD.
Why?
Just because I think Bitcoin is a sell the news event, so I don't want to get rug pulled by Bitcoin while I hold ETH. Like, that seems pretty dumb to me.
Okay.
If anything, I would just trade the Bitcoin pair, which you can only do if you trade leverage realistically, or if you're just like, if you're trading spot and you had Bitcoin the entire way up, you can, and you never want to sell that. And I mean, then the trade into ETH maybe makes sense. Like, you just move your Bitcoin into ETH, and then you technically did the ETH BTC trade. But I wouldn't want to touch ETHUSD personally. I don't mind the ratio trade. I think that one at least like deserves a chance, right? Like, because the invalidation is quite easy. Something that I talked about on my last Wednesday stream, which would be basically a new low. Now it's quite far away from that, but still, you can still do that. It's a decent trade. And like high time frame trades can have a little bit of a higher, like a wider invalidation. But like anything below 0.05 would be invalidation for ETH. And then your target is like new highs, basically. So I that trade I can get behind. The ETHUSD trade, I think it gets much more complicated, just based on the fact that I think there's a good chance that Bitcoin gives us a little bit of a pullback.
Is there anything technical in ETHUSD specifically that gives you concern, or is it the implications of a larger Bitcoin pullback that's the main driver there?
I mean, ETHUSD closed on the monthly resistance, like pretty much straight up bearish retest. Now it's trading quite a bit above it. It's trading exactly at the next resistance on that chart. So I mean, for me, this
fucking
is like,
hate this time frame on ETH though. Sorry, man. Like,
I mean, I'm not necessarily the biggest fan on ETHUSD in general. Like, just ETHUSD has just been completely and utterly shit as like a trading pair, in my opinion, in comparison to a lot of other trading pairs. It's also running into weekly resistance or like it's trading a little bit above it at like 2.5. And I'm not saying I'm bearish this, right? Like, I'm not saying ETHUSD is gonna go down, because I think, like, if you're bullish ETH BTC, that seems kind of dumb to say. I'm just saying, like, the risk that you take is that you're gonna be up 1 or 2% on your ETH trade, on your ETHUSD trade, whereas if you traded ETH BTC, you might be up 8, 10, 12 if Bitcoin goes down. So, like, that's kind of what I'm saying. Like, I'm not saying ETHUSD has to go down. I don't really have a view on ETHUSD. I just have a view on ETH BTC.
Yep, that is consistent. It makes sense. I mean, this is already a massive move for the ETH BTC pair, regardless of the time frame on which you look at it.
Which is quite nice, right? Because it basically, like, the moment the Bitcoin ETF went live, I mean, we had a little bit of front running, but basically yes, you got like a pretty decent entry. Like, I think it's up like 10% since, or like 13% since the ETF, the Bitcoin ETF, which is a pretty straightforward signal, in my opinion. Like, if you're trading at all and you kind of like were looking for an ETH entry, that one was nice.
Yeah, and also when we got like the SEC hack tweet leak thing, that's exactly what the market did, right? Like BTC spiked and went down, and ETH went up. And we had all the memes about the market showing its hand. It's, you know, this market's been really nice, Don. The hackers just give you a preview of the price action.
It's actually
like
true.
Cointelegraph in turn gives you a preview, and then the fucking SEC hacker gives you a preview. These are white hats, you know. Don't jail them.
Don't say that too loud.
Yeah, I take it back. Any altcoins you want to talk about apart from Litecoin? I feel like we can't talk about altcoins now that we've done Litecoin. Just feels like we've done enough on that front.
Yeah, it feels like, why would you buy anything else besides Litecoin?
Oh man,
dude, why does this look so good on the day? It's gonna be a disappointment. Just, I mean, if you look at Litecoin, Bitcoin on the weekly, the horrendous chart, one of the worst charts I've ever seen. But yeah, I mean, it's Litecoin always disappoints, but for some reason I like the daily.
Don't know, man. It's a green candle.
It is a green candle. But no, I think in general, I've been shit talking ETH and been like, you need to buy other things, right? Like that's been my whole shtick, and I mean, you've been on board with that as well. I think we kind of have to reverse course on this, and I think it makes more sense to hold ETH than anything else. From like a risk-based perspective, because if we get any fuckery on Bitcoin or anything else, I think the best altcoin to hold where you don't get completely rug pulled is going to be ETH. Even if you're wrong on ETH, you're not going to lose even close to as much as you're going to lose elsewhere. Whereas if you're right and the market goes up, I think ETH could perform as well as other altcoins do, just based on the fact that it does have a narrative. So I think ETH is now the place to be, just based on the fact that you take less risk for pretty much the same reward as you would get in other altcoins. That's kind of my hot take on this front.
Oh, well, you're not allowed to change your mind, Don, because I will just find a tweet of you shitting on ETH from like 2 months ago and say this you and get a bunch of likes. So.
Oh, I was shitting on ETH like the day before it actually bottomed, I think, or like 2 days before it bottomed.
It's fine. You had the trend line, you know.
I did have the trend line. But yeah, no, I mean, just it's always like this is always. I think I've been on this front quite consistent. It's just been like you wait for the ETF and then you can do whatever the fuck you want. And I think right now it makes a lot of sense to, like, if I had to, a lot of people have been kind of writing me, hey, what do you think about Solana? I think ETH's going to outperform Solana. No matter whether like price goes up or down, I think ETH's going to outperform Solana. And I think that's quite the bold take to make or to have, just based on the fact that Solana just literally just went up only mode for a long, long time against ETH. But that's kind of where my head's at on the altcoin front. Like, you had your fun with the shitters. Now it's time for now I think you're better off with ETH. Maybe even better off with like who the fuck knows.
How time sensitive is that view? So for example, say you get the larger BTC pullback to a high time frame support. Could you then justify buying ETH instead of BTC, or is this contingent on, or is the ETH bullishness contingent on BTC being moderate to bullish and not bearish?
I mean, if ETH closes above this weekly resistance that it's been struggling with for so long, and this is still an if, right? We still have the weekend to go, and who the fuck knows what's going to happen on this weekend. It's actually going to be fun to observe like the flows. Just, we have an ETF now, right? And that's going to be closed on the weekend. So like there's new ways to fuck over the suits by having fuckery on the weekend. But yeah, if we close above that weekly resistance and like above 0.06 on ETH BTC, I think if the entire market dips, ETH's the best buy. Yeah.
You might have to look at an ETH USD chart, Don. God forbid.
I might actually have to, yeah, at that point. But how I usually do this is basically I look at Bitcoin, like, and I figure out, okay, this is the support. And then I look at whatever the Bitcoin pairs tell me, like whichever coin I want to buy. And so I'm not going to look at ETHUSD most likely.
The lengths you go to avoid looking at any chart that isn't BTC, Don, is really impressive.
No. I just really hate ETHUSD. Actually, there's a lot of charts that I actually like, altcoin charts as well, even on the USD pairs, but I just fucking hate ETHUSD. I think it's made to take your money for some reason. Like it's the jar of the devil. Don't just look elsewhere.
Understandable, yeah. Don, news-wise,
Yes.
we covered a few of them, and implicitly we've covered a few as well because so much of it is ETF related. So there's BlackRock's new spot Bitcoin ETF tops 1 billion in big first day of trading. Vanguard won't offer spot Bitcoin ETFs, says high volatility is bad for generating long-term returns.
Yeah.
Spot Bitcoin ETF verdict less likely to sell the news event now, according to K33. And then
they're also quick. Like people were literally like, "Where's to sell the news event?" 5 minutes after the ETF launch. No, like what the fuck? Like I've never seen this come so quickly. Like people are writing whole dissertations about how it wasn't a sell the news event.
It's like at the same price as the ETF, and you get this treatise on why Bitcoin was a buy the news on the ETF. Yeah.
It's wild. Yeah.
It's a bit jumpy. No, it's fine. And then the last one is 5 key talking points as spot Bitcoin ETF sent the second day of trading. And this is like trading volumes, early data on inflows versus the GBTC stuff, the role that retail is playing, and the springboard for more ETF-based products. So basically ETF season in the headlines, which is terribly surprising.
I just want to die. I cannot stand it.
I'm pretty tired of it. I'm really less sure about how much narrative longevity there is, at least in terms of this, if it's going to be the same magnitude as BTC, when it's like, oh, this is going to be the next one for an ETF. I think BTC, and we've already seen this trade playing out in ETH to some extent, but I would be surprised if we just continue this trend, indefinitely? Like until every coin has a spot ETF, are we just going to go down the list and trade that narrative for the market? And I think BTC has a special property, which is kind of the rising tide lifts all boats as far as its narratives go.
It's the S&P of crypto.
Yeah, exactly. And I just don't think that's as transferable for other assets. I guess my main theme for the week and just weeks to come is post-ETF price action. My general view is that rushing to conclusions like 1 or 2 days after just doesn't make any sense, both from assessing inflows, assessing volumes, assessing whether it's sell the news or not. It's just not it's not a good data set to look at. And I'm also curious to see as to how this ETH rotation plays out. If ETH BTC closes above 057 shit, I mean, that just looks good on the ETH BTC front. But at least in the back of my mind, I'm cognizant that in the past, I don't remember exactly which year it was, but do you remember when ETH just pumped and melted faces after BTC topped? It might have been like 18 or something, early 18.
Oh yeah, I mean it's a typical kind of thing. Like you get this all the time when after Bitcoin tops, like the ETH just going off afterwards, just with a delay.
Yes. And so that pattern of ETH taking over from BTC creates a window where like the ETH trade is really good, but then the price to pay for that ends up being very steep. So I'm also trying to balance, and this is going to be a funny term to use, not getting trapped. Not getting trapped and just like yeeting myself further out on the risk curve post ETF, thinking this is like an infinite rotation game, right? Where you just, spot BTF, Jesus. Spot Bitcoin ETF, buy Bitcoin for the ETF, and then you rotate to ETH for the ETH ETF, and then you rotate for something else for that ETF, then you just never risk off and you're always stuck at the casino. I'm naturally very wary of those types of narratives. So I just don't like the idea of infinite rotation, infinite money printer, because as much as I'd love for it to be true, at a certain point you just have to fucking take profit and get out of the damn thing, right? And the whole shit is corrective in nature. Although to be completely clear, if you had to sort of disassemble me in the comments, the easiest argument there would be, well, of course that is your bias because you performed pretty badly in terms of capturing upside from like 35 onwards. So naturally you're more inclined to outcomes that take price back to areas where you can do business. But that doesn't mean it has to happen. That's probably the most accurate criticism of sorts one can make. So there's always that.
Yeah, I mean, criticisms you will always find anyway. Like,
one that I read that I found quite interesting. And also to be clear, like all the comments, I read all the comments. I don't know if Don does. He's
I do.
Such a self-centered narcissist.
What?
No, I'm joking. We read all the comments. The vast majority is super positive, and we appreciate everyone who leaves a comment, even if it's friends, or you know that guy who comments friends every week. Fucking love him.
Oh yeah, very cute.
So good, man. In any case, there was one that stuck in my mind, and obviously it's the negative ones, because the positive ones you're like, yeah, fuck you, whatever, I know I'm great. And the one negative one, you're like, where does this guy live? So there was one comment. It was like, oh well, you know, you guys have been bearish since like 35k, saying that the risk to reward isn't there. Just to clarify, and correct me if I'm wrong, and you know, there's a whole historical record that you can look back on. I think the crux of the argument that was being made on this show was that from a swing perspective, there's fuck all to do in a market that doesn't pull back more than 5-10%. And I distinctly remember making a sort of corollary point to that, which is that if you don't have a swing setup, you basically have to play it really close to the market, use lower time frames, use some fucking moving average shit, because if you're locked out from the high time frames, you just have to use the low time frame ones. So it wasn't like a bearish thing per se. It was, oh, look, well, invalidation is at 32, 35k, and here's where the market is now. It's far away, therefore you short. That's not the argument. The argument is if your framework is like a pullback-oriented swing perspective, then there's fuck all to do in a market that doesn't give you entries. So you either have to do fuck all and be comfortable with that, maybe be comfortable waiting for 60 to go back to 40, or from 40 to go back to 30, or whatever else, or you just scrap that framework because it's not applicable to the current conditions and trade closer to the market with all your low time frame trend following stuff. I think maybe we explain it poorly, or it's just a bad faith misinterpretation or whatever else. Just because the swing setup isn't there doesn't mean there's no setup, doesn't mean you have to short the absence of a setup.
Yeah, I mean, if just because I'm not buying doesn't mean I'm bearish. Like that, I mean, I can be, and I was, I think, for some parts of it, maybe, possibly. I mean, people will know better than I do, because for me, like I have my positions, and then the moment I close them, I just forget everything about it.
Amnesia, yeah. That's a good trading thing to have, though.
Yeah. So like people always remind me of stuff that I supposedly have done. I'm like, I'm pretty sure this is not how it happened, but I mean,
yeah, Don, you owe me 50,000. Do you remember that loan?
No, I don't remember that one though. But yeah, I'm always surprised how people are like kind of misinterpreting stuff. Like I always try to put it in a way where you cannot, and people always find a way to kind of misinterpret things.
Well, you made them sell 37.5k, Don. You fucking made them.
I mean,
gunpoint, families tied up, ransomware, everything, the whole shebang.
Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be great when we're trading at 35k, and people are gonna be like, "You made me sell 37.5. Thank you so much. I captured like whatever."
Oh,
no,
Jesus.
But it's wild to me, because at the end of the day, like, we're just giving opinions, you know.
Yeah.
Like, no one is doing like any. We're not even giving financial advice.
Yes, definitely not.
We're just giving the opinion that we have on the market, and it's gonna be wrong quite a few times. It has been wrong quite a few times, and that is something that everyone has to kind of deal with. I mean, I honestly, like, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, and if I'm right, I make money. And it's like, it's whatever, you know. Like, as long as the balance goes up, as long as that's in a line that is somewhat trending up,
yeah.
I don't really mind too much. And the funny thing is, like, I haven't had a losing trade. I haven't had a losing trade in pretty much a year now, and I'm still getting shit on, which kind of is wild to me, because this is literally how it's been. But I do get, like, you do want to squeeze everything out of the market if you can. We're not necessarily in that business, though. Like, at least for me, I can speak for myself. I'm really not in the market to squeeze every last bit out of it. I'm trying to get the pieces where I have reason. We have good reasons to kind of take a trade. And because if you try to squeeze everything out of the market, what happens very quickly is that you become like gambling addicted, you know. Like, you just get stuck in this mindset of, I have to have a position on it at all times, and just by definition your edge doesn't work all the time. Like, I would like to see someone that has edge 24/7, 365 days of the week. That makes no sense. 365 days of the year. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, it just doesn't exist. So for me, that's not how I operate, and I think that's not how no one should really be operating.
I agree. So. Especially this show. Like, fuck, you know? Like, if you're gonna whatever. Like I think holding people to account, whatever the fuck that means, is like a silly concept. Because it's just like putting opinions up there, and it's like mostly an entertainment product. But like on Casual Friday, I mean, God help you. This is just like two co-workers of like
fuck off.
2 co-workers of like 7 years just like catching up and shooting the shit, you know?
Yes.
And that's not to say it's a completely useless thing, because we're like reasonably experienced, have seen some shit, and have decent experience in like articulating things, because we've been streaming and doing this shit for a while. But it's not like, you know, we are right, listen to us, lead you to the promised land. It's not that type of thing, you know. In general, I think this is like a nice background thing to have playing in your headphones or your home, or if you're on a walk or some shit, and hopefully it makes you laugh a little bit, and maybe there's some nuggets of useful information that makes you think better. And you know, there are other people out there of varied quality who will make promises as far as listen to me if you want to make money. But yeah, maybe listen to us if you want to keep money. We're probably better at that than the making money part, Don.
Yeah, actually, I think that's how we could kind of market the show. This is how you keep it. I think Ledger always does this very well too. Like Ledger status, like he always is like the voice of reason. You might not make as much money as other people, but you just need to keep more, and then you're still going to outperform the entire market if you get to keep more of your money.
And a lot of trading should be boring, you know? Like it obviously depends on your trading system and stuff, but like most of it is waiting, and then the small period where you're not waiting and executing, as soon as you're done, you're waiting, you know? And yes, there are elements to trading, like, you know, when you're researching an edge or looking at flows or keeping up with the news or whatever that is active, but like the actual act of trading isn't supposed to be like super bombastic and fascinating, especially with like how my trading system has worked recently. Now, admittedly, a lot of it has just been sort of not holding monthly timeframes according to my own rules, which is like unfortunate. So you still make some, but you're like, fuck, if I did less, I would make more. I think there's something valuable in that. But also I just find that if I'm trading like lower time frame all the way up to like intraday edges and even like 1 to 3 days, a lot of those setups for me work best when the market is really boring, you know, which is antithetical to good content creation, which is that you want to be super active when everything's super hot and you're like trend following 10 different things and just firing on all cylinders. But fortunately or unfortunately, that's just not how I trade, not how I make money. I'm just better in the quieter conditions and sort of take what's mine and leave through the back door type of thing. So if that comes across as never having an opinion or the whole not trading memes, like I completely get it. But I'd rather just share what I know makes sense to me and what works, rather than how many people have we seen, Don, especially in the past 7 years? They have no semblance of a system whatsoever, right? They'll just trend hop from one indicator to one trading system, depending on what's popular. One day they're like a BTC trader, and then they just start like trend following a bunch of alts, and then they're on chain. Just never really fucking figure it out or have any type of identity or edge. And I think those people are periodically okay to follow, and they'll hit hot streaks and stuff. But I'll take the stable and boring, for better or for worse.
Yeah, and I mean, at the end of the day, like, you do whatever fits you best, right? Like there's something that we keep on saying, but for some reason it never really arrives at to everyone. But like, you just have to trade your own way and your own style and your own money at the end of the day. So you press the buttons. Whatever we say doesn't really matter.
Or you press the buttons, as I've read on Twitter.
Oh, I mean, apparently I do, yeah. But yeah, I mean, that's just how it is. I mean, this is a long way to make excuses of how shit we are. Because
mate, we're so fucking washed up.
It's
if I were like an anonymous commenter type of person, I could just completely wreck this channel. Like it'd be so easy, because compared to the stuff that does well on Twitter and the popular ways of trading and the asset classes and the watch lists and the altcoins and how you express conviction, all that type of shit, we're boring and washed up as fuck, right? Just straight up boomers. Look at BTC, look at BTC charts. Oh, ETH going up is so scary. Never cover any altcoins. It's quite a funny archetype,
Oh, it's the worst channel on the planet.
It's so fucking bad.
But it's ours.
But it's ours, yes.
We should end on that.
We absolutely should. Happy ETF to everyone who celebrates. Thank you for watching this episode of Casual Friday. If you made it this far, I'm like genuinely impressed at this point.
So. Oh yes, I mean that was so much rambling.
There's something wrong with
say something before we end.
Go on.
And I've like this has really not been coming across, I think, this entire episode. But I think having the ETF is actually great for us. Gives us a lot of legitimacy as like a space, as like an industry. So like it's a good thing all in all. So don't be like, even if this sell the news thing, which it might, don't be too sad if it goes down, because I think having the ETF gives us a higher price floor, right? Which to me, obviously not the best, because I like to buy low, but that just means it also gives us a higher ceiling. So whatever you consider low or high has changed with us getting ETF. So if you get to buy like lower, like 35 or 37, or even if it goes to 60 and then comes back to 40, exciting times are ahead, I think. And this is good news. Not necessarily like the fundamental side of things I'll just completely ignore, because I think it's a little bit not like, it doesn't really fit with the ethos of crypto, the whole ETF thing. But just from a price perspective, like this is a good thing. And I don't want to kind of shit talk all of that by saying, hey, look, it's a sell the news event because price went up, because at the end of the day, something good happened for the industry, I think.
There you go. We managed to get a fucking positive monologue out of DonAlt around the ETF. This feels like a bigger deal than the ETF itself.
Big surprise, huh? Yeah.
Can I veer us somewhere completely random for like 30 seconds?
Of course.
Do you ever notice like trader brain tendencies creeping over into real life where they shouldn't? And sometimes it's like not so great. So I've noticed in the past few months, at times it cropped up in whatever you could call my excuse for a personal life. Like if you meet someone and everything starts going really well, I actually become bearish. It's so bad. Like I can't get out of this mindset. Like, you know, you sort of start gradually like building a position and it's going up and the P&L is green. And then just the trader brain kicks in. And I'm like, oh, well, I should sell. You know, like this, I should just like fucking take profit and close this position. I'm not a swing trader. Like this is like the uncertainty goes up. I'm further away from invalidation. You know, my emotional maintenance margin is higher. Funding has gone up because so is my enjoyment. You know, like all of this shit. And I'm like, yeah, I need to sell. I need to go back to flat, which is the best position, and then buy dips on first dates or whatever. You know, do you ever have that?
Dude,
I mean, you're obviously like fucking married, kids and shit now.
But... No, I have the perfect example for it too, actually.
Go on.
Which is, so my fiance is like a very happy, very like outgoing, like she just likes to be very happy about things, you know?
That's disgusting, but yes.
Yeah. And the thing is, like she comes to me and she's super excited about something, and then she gets so excited about it that my trader brain goes on, and I'm like, wait, I need to fade this. But there has to be something negative about this, and it's actually not necessarily healthy, I think.
It's not at all.
That's something that I've been working on for the last like whatever, because I mean, it's obviously good if people around you are super happy, you know, and you don't want to be the person that just looks at the downsides of things. But it's something that I've been catching myself, where it's like, if people are too excited about something, I'm like, wait, where's the catch? Like where's this gonna rug pull me? But yeah, so I do have an example of that as well. It's not necessarily the best.
You can just imagine me fucking reaching some arbitrary milestone, like suburban home, wife, kids at a good school, and then I just leave and leave a note on the kitchen counter, like, thanks for playing, on to the next. Just fucking move to Guatemala and start a new life. It's like, I withdrew, you know, I'm starting to run up a new balance now. Jesus.
I mean, you gotta take profit.
You have to take profit. Yeah, let's end this shit, dude. We're so done.
Yep. Oh, here we are.
Thanks for watching. This is the best non-podcast podcast in the crypto space. Just two co-workers talking shit. Really appreciate you if you made it this far. Thank you to Woo for supporting whatever the fuck this is. Much appreciated. We will see you next week for the normal content stuff. Have a wonderful non-ETF trading weekend, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.